Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So glad to see some faces as well as just some names. And I would like to thank you all for coming out. My name is Sharnae Sanders, and I serve as the program coordinator at COAC Detroit. We are a resource hub for nonprofits and community organizations in Southeast Michigan. If you're unfamiliar with COAC, we offer various programs and collaborate with wonderful partners to support nonprofits and community organizations to better serve their communities. And today actually just happens to be National Stress Awareness Day. So I'm excited for all of us to be able to join virtually together for this program as part of our Nonprofit Wellbeing Series, because we know we can't serve others pouring from an empty cup. So we definitely understand that many nonprofit professionals like yourselves and community leaders alone wear so many hats within their organization, as well as the various roles and titles you wear outside of your work, whether it's being a mother, a parent, neighbor, a friend, a daughter, a son, whatever that is, we recognize that there's so much work that comes into just being able to show up fully. So we definitely thank you for showing up for yourselves today and invite you to show up in whatever way is comfortable for you. We would love to see your faces, but it's also understandable if you're unable to turn your screen on in this moment. We definitely invite you to engage with us via the chat using any of the reaction buttons that are at the bottom of your screen, as well as sharing verbally when noted. And we will also be utilizing the closed caption and live transcription feature. So you should be able to see that if you just kind of look at the bottom of your screen, and you should be able to see live transcript. And then from there, you can either show or hide the subtitles. If you have any troubles at all being able to see the subtitles or any Zoom problems, because we know living in Zoom land, anything is bound to happen, please just feel free to direct message me in the chat. I'll be happy to support. So to kind of really ground us into this moment, I would like to just think and recognize that one, it's been a year and plus since the pandemic began. And we know that it's been challenging time for people professionally and personally. So my hope today is that you find something of value that is practical and implementable to support your own well-being and to start thinking creatively about how we can activate a culture of well-being in our organizations. And honestly, I can't think of a better person to help us do this than the amazing, knowledgeable, and caring Beth Kanter. I say caring because Beth is a nonprofit thought leader who has been uplifting ways that the nonprofit community and leaders can better care for their well-being, and really challenging us to think of how we can go from a place of self-care to we care. Her third book, The Happy Healthy Nonprofit, Strategies for Impact Without Burnout, was actually the first book to advocate for personal and workplace resilience in the nonprofit sector. And her popular blog, Beth's Blog, established in 2003, was one of the first nonprofit blogs with stories about digital transformation, virtual and face-to-face facilitation techniques, workplace resilience, nonprofit organizational culture, and you guessed it, self-care for nonprofit professionals. So as a well-established international nonprofit thought leader, Beth has graced multiple physical and virtual stages, and we're so glad to be having her grace our very own stage today. While we couldn't bring her back to our actual space this time around, we're grateful to be connecting with her in Zoom and being able to have her for this important discussion. So with that being said, I would love to invite you all to put your physical hands or your virtual hands using the reactions together for a round of applause to welcome back to the virtual stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharnae, for that lovely introduction. And I was so excited to see the COAC space in your background. And I thought, oh, she's in the space. And she told me, no, it's a Zoom background, but it's such a lovely way to bring the space into this virtual space. I'm just going to get started, and I'm just going to run through the agenda. We have a lot in store for you. And let me just get this. So I'm going to be, dancing between sharing some content. We're going to have some small groups where you're going to get a chance to talk with your colleagues. So that's a point where you might want to be on camera if you're able to. It's not required. And And we're really dividing this into two sections. We're going to talk about work-life balance tips for leaders of nonprofits. There'll be a small group activity, and then we're going to talk about activating a culture of well-being, whether it's in the hybrid workplace or virtual workplace, wherever you are. Following the session, you'll see that URL right there. That will link you to the slides, a curated reading list I put together. I'm going to be mentioning and referencing a lot of different research and handouts and how-to articles. You'll find those all at that link. And just reinforcing the cameras on, cameras off rule. Please engage with the chat through the reaction buttons. Also, it's really important to take care of yourself. If you need to go off camera, if you need to walk away from the screen, that's perfectly fine. And again, captioning is available. Want to be as inclusive as possible. And you'll see me, I'm the one difficult thing, even though I've been doing it now for many, many months, is always this, as opposed to being in the room with folks, you have a lot more that's going on that you have to pay attention to, like buttons to click and chats to read. So bear with me. So I want to say that it's okay not to feel okay. And it's time for us to remove the stigma around that. If you've had moments during the past 18 months when you're not feeling okay, guess what? It's okay. It's okay to feel exhausted and overwhelmed. It's okay to put yourself at the top of your to-do list and to make time to rest and recharge or to ask for help. And just like Naomi and Simone Biles, who normalized talking about the importance of mental health, as nonprofit leaders, it's now time for us to focus on our own as well as our employees' mental health and remove that stigma. So the chart that you're looking at there on the right comes from Kaiser Health, and it shows a 300% increase in the rise of the number of adults reporting stress-related conditions like depression, anxiety. So the blue is from January to June of 2019, and that orange is just in January. So really, it's time to destigmatize mental health, provide a supportive culture, and make sure that your employees have access to services like your EAPs. Let's see if I can get this to sync. All right. So, we're facing this sort of, I'd say, a mental health epidemic, and it's unfolding. And it presents on a spectrum, just like COVID, from severe to mild symptoms to being healthy. And on the severe end of the spectrum, we have things like depression, anxiety, workplace burnout. But there's also something else that's in the middle, and it's been dubbed languishing by Adam Grant in a recent piece he wrote for the New York Times. And languishing means feeling blah, a kind of lack of motivation. It's not burnout because we still have energy and we're doing our work. It isn't depression. We don't feel hopeless. We just feel somewhat joyless. And as it turns out, there's a name for that, languishing. Languishing is a sense of stagnation and emptiness. It feels as if you're muddling through your days and looking at your life through a foggy windshield. And it might, who knows, it might be the word for 2021. So recognizing what we have been facing, and we're going to do a small activity to start, and I call it the sort of the COVID check-in, and it's actually an exercise you can be doing with your staff at staff meetings. And I'm going to stop right now because we're going to use the chat for this, and it's an exercise called grief walking, and it comes from a playbook of Liberating Structures, which is participatory facilitation. And I'm using a technique called waterfall chat. Okay. And so I'm going to be giving you a series of prompts, and I'm going to ask you to think about it, type it into the chat. And when I say send, just we send it to each other with love. And it's a way to kind of build community. So I'm going to set up the prompt, and then there's going to be the for prompt. So we're already dealing with a lot of uncertainty in the face of the pandemic. You know, our work, as Charnay had mentioned at the beginning, you know, workplaces, families, our day-to-day activities, and uncertainty is really stressful because we know we can't control everything. So think about how that makes you feel. And the first prompt is if only ... And so I want you to think about how it makes you feel. Type your answer into the chat, but don't send it until I give you the word. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't matter if there's typos. Think for a moment. Kind of look up. If I see you on camera, you can look up, and that lets me know you're done typing. And let's start to send it. You can hit send, and let's just send it. It's going to be like a waterfall. It's kind of falling over us. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you can just look away, but just try to like look through and see what people, how everyone's feeling. So the more hours in a day, wishful thinking, I had more time, feel more rested. Yes, I'm feeling that way. My to-do list was complete. I had more time. That we know what would happen this quarter in COVID. Oh gosh, I hear you. I feel you. Organizational leaders actually cared. Yes, I wish I could do more. Okay, so the next prompt is, it makes me ... So how does that make you feel? Think about it. Type it into the chat. When we're ready, I'll give you the word to send it. And we'll have the waterfall trickle down. All right, ready to send, and we're sending it with love. We're making connections. And look, you know, try to scroll up through the chat and see what people are saying. See if you're making a connection. I see a theme here of overwhelmed, exhausted, drained, feel crazy. We want to be careful with that wording because that could be a trigger word for people with mental disabilities. We feel so exhausted, indecisive, ineffective. Yes, these are all symptoms of stress. Okay, we're coming to the third prompt, which is, I have to ... I have to. Think about it. Write your answer in the chat, and then send it when I give you the word. All right, let's let the waterfall come. Let it just fall over us, and sort of scroll back and see what people are saying as the water falls by. Moving forward is a theme. Working harder to get it done. Keep the day moving. Juggle. Yes. Do my best. Yes. Be stronger. A lot of us are sharing what our coping strategies are, and we have those strategies within us. And the final prompt is, when all is said and done, ... When all is said and done, think about your answer to the prompt, and we can share it in the chat. All right, let's share with love. I'm seeing I can do my best. I will get balanced. I'll understand what really matters. I'm worthy. I will accept my limits. People in love are what matter most. I love that, Emma. Thank you for that. So we see that it is difficult, but we have coping mechanisms within us, and we can also see positivity in the future. So this is a really nice exercise. It's something you can adapt. You can check it in. You can check in generally with folks. You can also check in around a specific project or issue, and it's a great short kind of check-in exercise that you can do with your staff as a team building exercise, because we know that feelings matter. It's not all just being objective. We have to appreciate and acknowledge people's feelings. So thank you for that. Let me go back to sharing my desktop as I switch. I call this Zoom aerobics. clicking different buttons. There we go. All right, got it up. Great. And welcome to those of you who just joined us. We're just getting underway. And I'm moving now I'm going to talk a little bit about work-life balance and why it's an organizational responsibility, not an individual responsibility, and then go into some ways that you as leaders can encourage work-life balance and with others at your organization. So the first thing is that the term burnout is defined as that it's an emotional, mental, physical exhaustion that occurs when we feel overwhelmed by too many demands, too few resources, and too little recovery time. And I used to say that definition, and people would say that's like working at my nonprofit. But that is the WHO definition, and it is caused by chronic stress that's not been managed by the organization, all right? The term burnout was coined in the 1970s, and the medical community has debated how to define it ever since. And in 2019, the World Health Organization included burnout in its International Classification of Diseases, the ICD-11, which is just where they keep the list of what diseases are that can be recognized. And it categorized burnout as explicitly as a workplace issue. And so the WHO definition finally acknowledges that burnout is a workplace problem, not an employee problem. It doesn't mean, this means that burnout is no longer about something wrong with the employee. And really the burden of preventing and managing burnout is not an individual responsibility, it's an organizational culture problem. So, and a lot of it burnout comes with a great cost. Okay, so let's look at some of the causes. Unmanageable workload, unreasonable time pressure, too much to do and wanting it yesterday, not going at the pace of grace. As I learned a phrase from Charnay. Lack of role clarity and autonomy, not feeling like not sure what your job is and what you're responsible for and being able to do it. Lack of communication and support from managers and unfair treatment at work. And this includes, in addition, unfair treatment, I put discrimination, microaggressions, just all the things that happen that are unfair. And, it comes with its cost. 63% of people who are feeling burned out are likely to take a sick day, and that costs money. They're 2.6 times more likely to be actively seeking a different job. And all of you, if you've hired people in your organization, you know that takes time and it takes money to hire somebody, the right person, bring them up to speed. And all of that results in a reduction in performance goals and the sort of spiraling downward of productivity. And that's, we don't want this, right? So organizations, I think, really need to understand that their employees have a life outside of work, and that work-life balance is a really important piece of this equation. Later on in this workshop, we're going to look at other things like connectivity and communication and ways of working together. But encouraging work-life balance of employees is a piece of this. And so those of you who are leaders, you have to understand that your behavior is contagious, to use a metaphor. So you need to be modeling self-care and modeling work-life balance, because that sets the tone for the culture. And because if the leader isn't doing it, then people think, well, maybe that's not what we should be doing. If the leader is overworking and sending out emails all the time and is stressed out, not taking a vacation, not doing all the things that we need to get the right work-life balance, then that becomes the culture, and it can be really toxic. So the first tip is about asking the right questions. And there's an old adage that says, what gets measured gets done. And you can actually use different assessment tools. I have one in my book called the Happy Healthy Nonprofit Burnout Assessment, but you can actually measure burnout. It's also an educational tool because it can help employees understand what the symptoms are of burnout. And if you do this regularly, you get to understand like what is going on in our organization that's leading and causing and is contributing to this burnout. It's also really important to ask the right questions to get feedback so you can get to the root of the stress. And you need to allow your staff and your team to define it in their own words. And you need to then share this feedback with employees and be transparent, encourage trust. At the employee level, when people are feeling burnout, they don't always know what those symptoms are. There could be physical symptoms of, not getting enough rest, being, the impact of stress. And this burnout happens over time, and it happens in stages. And we all start out passion-driven. We love our work. We're very passionate about helping our community. And if we don't take that time to have some work-life balance and some self-care, we get to passion waning. Here we might have some headaches or maybe some aches and pains or be a little tired, but we just keep on going. And during the pandemic, it was so easy to overwork and not go out, not take care of ourselves. But if we keep on going, we get to passion challenge. And here, we might have a little bit of attitude. We might have a shorter fuse, a little irritability. Maybe we can't focus as much, maybe we're procrastinating more. All these kinds of things are symptoms of burnout. And if we get up to that red stage, passion depleted, we're burned out, we're not good to ourselves, we're not good to our organizations, we're not good to our families, and it's harder to bounce back. So it's really good to, at an organizational level, understand what's causing the burnout, at an individual level, know what those symptoms are, and when to get into self-care mode. So this is a pro tip. I call it the personal chaos index, and it comes from the addiction literature. And when you're addicted to something, you just pay attention to that and nothing else. And cleanliness, or there's forgetfulness. So I have my own personal chaos index, and that's dishes in the sink, because every morning when I wake up, if I have dishes in the sink, and sadly those are mine, I like to clean them out and get them in the dishwasher, because it takes a few minutes and I feel like I've accomplished something right in the first few minutes of my day. It's part of my morning routine. And if I come and see dishes in the sink later in the day, I know that I've told myself that I'm too busy to do the dishes. And so for me, that's a cue to hit the pause button and to really reflect on, I'm getting stressed and I need to rethink and do something about this. Why don't you share your PCI in the chat, if you will. Let's see. What is it? Some people double book themselves at meetings, or another one I've been hearing lately is that they try to do email in between back-to-back Zoom meetings and they forget about the next meeting, or they come late. Those kinds of behaviors. Some people, laundry piling up, a messy desk. So those are some. Not eating lunch until 4 p.m. Yes. When I forget to eat, when email box gets, okay. So a lot of you are identifying these kind of behaviors. So write it on a sticky note, keep an eye out for that, and take that as your signal that you need to pay attention to work-life balance and to some self-care. Okay. So the next tip is about remembering the basics, and the basics are around sleep, nutrition, and exercise. And this is all stuff that your mother told you, or that your doctor told you, or that maybe you heard from your aunt or somebody, and maybe we rolled our eyes. But it is so important for us to come and show up and be our best to make sure that we're covering the basics, especially sleep. And I want to call out the importance of a good night's sleep, that's 6 to 8 hours. A lot of us have been, I'll say not a lot of us. I'll say I did this. We had this, there's this new trend called revenge bedtime procrastination. And what that is that you don't have any time for yourself. So you end up staying up late and streaming Netflix or doing that stuff that you didn't get to do because you didn't have time for yourself. And what you're doing is you're robbing your sleep, and then you wake up sleep deprived, and it's just not a good a good routine. You need to replace that with a calm routine. And, maybe having a cup of tea, maybe reading a book, getting off the screen, trying not to think about work before going to bed. And pro tip, if you're still experiencing that sleep insomnia, then the Sleep With Me podcast is pretty awesome. Exercise, snacking. Can't get to the gym. In some places you can, or maybe we don't want to, or maybe we never went to the gym in the first place, and that's okay. But you can exercise in small bites and you can still get some benefits, whether it's stretching, whether it's taking a walk around your block. I take a morning stroll before work. I've replaced my work commute for 15 minutes, and I'm still getting the benefits of exercise, but in small chunks. The pandemic, all of us working from home and virtually, it's blurred the lines between work and home. And you can see that chart on the right. We're actually, during the beginning of the pandemic, we were working longer hours, actually on an average of 2 to 3 hours per day. And that trend continued into the pandemic, and we're still working more hours than we were before the pandemic. And we have a danger of normalizing that and normalizing overwork, which is not a good thing for our resilience. And so one of the most important things is to use rituals to create these boundaries between home and work life. And that's Marie Kondo. Some of you may have read her book on the lifetime magic of tidying up, where you're supposed to tidy your closet and pick up each piece of clothing. And if it doesn't spark joy, give it to the Goodwill. And she talks a lot about creating rituals that when working from home, that separate work from home life. Now, she brings a tuning fork and lights a candle and has essential oils. I'm not suggesting you do that, but what is a ritual that you can do that puts that space between home personal time and home work time? Maybe it's doing some meditation. For me, it's my morning routine. No matter what, I'm a coffee drinker. I love my coffee. That little image says make tea. Some people are tea drinkers, but I steal that time for myself before I give it to others. I feed myself first so I can help others. And that's that morning time with coffee. It's a boundary management. I fight my guilt from I have to be at my work and doing email. No, I don't. I need time for myself. And activities, that cup of coffee. Journaling. I keep a journal. Plan your day, plan your vacation, exercise or reading. I'm a published author, and when I'm in writing mode, that's my writing time. So think about think about being intentional about your morning routine. If your morning routine is to wake up and look at your work email, think about replacing that with something that's more calming, and think about something that you really want to do. And it doesn't have to take the whole morning. It could just be 20, 30 minutes. Embrace single tasking. All right. So we've gotten really good at multitasking in our culture, right? Especially with virtual meetings, because a lot of us we have so many meetings that we're trying to catch up on email. And that's not good. So time boxing can help this, or single tasking. So block some time out and focus on a single task. Don't try to do two things at once, because that drains us. I can't tell you, I had gotten to a bad habit of multitasking, and I was feeling so drained. And when I discovered kind of what single tasking can give you back your focus, I just felt a sense of renewal. So embrace single tasking. Reducing Zoom fatigue. So there is this thing called Zoom exhaustion, Zoom fatigue. It's been identified by researchers at Stanford University. It's called nonverbal overload. By looking at all of the faces on the screen, it's causing the flight and fight response. And that little chart that's on the right there, that comes from the Microsoft Human Factors Lab. And the first is a chart of stress indicators of people who didn't take breaks in between Zoom meetings. You see their stress levels are straight, right? And then the the second chart below it is people that took a 5-minute break in between their Zoom meetings and their stress levels went down. So taking breaks between Zoom meetings can really help our brains and can really sort of tame some of that stress, which is so important. We don't want to have constant stress because that weakens our immune system. Some things you can do if you don't have a group norm around turning cameras on or off, and we'll talk about this in the second half. And these are tips that come from Stanford University and their research base. Increase mobility, give permission to walk around. So far we're like glued at the screen, but it's okay to stand or to step away. Reduce eye contact or intensity, sit further away. What I do with the screen is I make that grid really small. So I'm not seeing it so big. Turn off self-view, I think, is one of the best things you can do. And you can do that by going up to the right corner to the ... and it turns off that self-view. So you don't have to look at yourself because that's stressful too. And it's leading to something called Zoom dysmorphia, where people are like dissatisfied with the way they look and it's making them feel bad. It's mostly happening with teens. And also once in a while, reduce that audio, the cognitive load, and just do an audio only meeting. I do this now with teams that I work with, and we have an afternoon meeting. We just have an old-fashioned conference call on our mobile phones, and you're allowed to pace around on your mobile phone, or sometimes I go outside and walk multitask by walking my dog, and I'm getting the best of both. I'm having my team meeting, but I'm getting some exercise, and I'm not so exhausted at the end of the day. Managing your energy in addition to your time. Our body works in these energy reps. They're called ultradian rhythms, where we can focus for about this 90 minutes, but then we've used up our energy supply and we have to replenish it by just taking a break. So if you're sitting and using your keyboard as a lunch tray, that's not good. Go take a walk. You are entitled to a lunch break. If you take a walk during lunch, that replenishes your energy. So think about breaks as not goofing off. Try not to feel guilty about it, and think about it as replenishing your energy so you can be more productive. I like joyful breaks. And what I did during the pandemic, here in California, we have hummingbirds, and I put hummingbird feeders on my windows so I could just turn away from the camera and see hummingbirds come. And they're so amazing to watch and fly. I know you're all in Detroit and you're near a lake versus the ocean. I'm here in California. I'm fairly close to the ocean. It's 20 minutes away. And there are some times when I've had a hectic week and it has been stressful. And my husband and I decided it's really been stressful. We're going to head to the coast, and we knock off a little bit early and we look at the ocean, and it's very calming. Even if you're just going to a park, or if there's some trees in your neighborhood, or just getting outside. So think about joyful breaks. And finally, create a plan. Work-life balance, it requires some intention, and writing a plan for yourself creates that intention. And it's also about habit change. We might have to be switching from some not great habits to some better habits. And that happens by doing it in making them small and anchoring it to an existing behavior that you're already doing, and then celebrating when you do it. And the pro tip, the last one before we go into small groups, will be plan your vacation. Okay, plan in advance, whether it's 6 months, 90 days, put a stake in your calendar, put a boundary there. Research shows that workers who take their vacations are way more productive at work. It's your chance to recharge, and it prevents burnout. And what happens, I was guilty of this. I would not put the time for like the holidays or something in my calendar, and there'd be meetings scheduled, and I couldn't say no. I didn't have a way to say no. So now I do that. I routinely plan my vacations. They're staycations sometimes. I took a vacation, a quick road trip to Yosemite. I'm here in California and I planned that 6 months in advance. Took it 2 weeks ago because I knew in October leading up to that I was going to have a hectic couple months, and we staked it out in the calendar. And then the other thing I do is I get offline, and I don't do work emails while I'm staring at the beautiful images of Yosemite, because that's not a vacation. right? I want to take in all that beauty. And it means that I have to make an exit plan. I have to get staff to, to educate people. I'm not doing work during this time. If there's an emergency, here's my phone number. Hope you don't need to call it. And I leave myself a re-entry day when I come back to do my laundry and to just run through my email. Because I used to not do that. I used to not want to take a vacation because I was afraid that my email would get so out of control that I would never catch up. And when I found out, that was not true. And I get a lot of email. So don't deprive yourself of your vacation because you're afraid that or don't deprive yourself of really stepping away and not from work during your vacation time because you're afraid that your email is just going to be so overwhelming when you come back. Okay, so those are a couple of work-life balance tips that you can do for yourself, that you as a leader can model for others, and that your organization can find ways to encourage your staff to also practice these through various programs. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to be putting you in breakout rooms. I think everybody's probably experienced that so far. And I'm going to give you a prompt. We're going to put you in really small rooms. Let me put the prompt in the chat so you can reference it. And I want you to think about what your work-life engagement strategy is. What activities can you incorporate into your life to boost your personal resilience and stay energized at work? What do you need to stop doing? And how can your organization encourage this? Encourage, let me type that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm noting the time. I'm going to put you into breakout groups, and you're going to have, I'd say, about 8 minutes or so, and you're going to be going into smaller groups of, let's see what we have here. I'm going to put you into groups of 3 people each. Okay. And this is really where it kind of makes sense to turn your cameras on if you're comfortable. So it's just a small group. You're going to introduce yourselves, and you're just going to talk about these prompts. They're in the chat. All right. So I'm going to create it, and you're just going to be swept into the breakout room. So let's go. And for anybody that might have missed the prompt, it's in the 4 squares below. You can click on that and you'll see your invitation. And what I just want to make sure, I see somebody's, I want to make sure that we have enough people in each of the rooms. Okay. I don't want to see anybody by themselves. There's one person by themselves, so I'm going to move them to, let's see which room. I'm going to move them to room 2. Move to room 2. Okay. Quick look. So is Maria on your team?
No, Maria is not.
Okay.
No.
Ingrid is, right? No? Anybody here? Oh, Emma. So we have Emma, Ingrid, and Maria.
Yeah.
They might have stepped away.
Oh yeah, I was wondering. Let me make a
note. Some people don't like to do small groups, so that's fine.
Oh, and let me pause it actually.
Welcome back. Always those breakout groups we're always too short on time, and hopefully you're able to make a good connection and talk about ways to encourage work-life balance for yourself and your staff. And one quick way to do a report out is I'm going to use a app called Slido. Some of you, if you've used this before, just maybe give me a thumbs up or something. There's a similar one called Mentimeter. But what we're going to do is create a word cloud. So what you need to do is to go to slido.com, and it's going to ask you to type in that code, COAC 113. It doesn't matter if it's capital or lowercase. You can do this on your phone too. And the prompt is, what are some ideas that resonated? So and it doesn't have to be perfect that you type in, just type in a few words, high level themes, and we'll see what bubbles up. Take a walk. I'm always for taking a walk or a stroll, because some people don't walk. Some people stroll, and I learned this at COAC when I was there in person. Boundaries, yes, boundaries are so important. Friday afternoons off. And also, if let's see what's here. Walk and talk meetings with camera on Zoom. Yes, there's also a new app out called Snap, and it's designed just for walking meetings. Sometimes you have to, the mobile version of Zoom is a little bit different than the desktop version, and you have to learn how to click those buttons. Sometimes I just resort to FaceTime if it's a one-to-one. Wow. Releasing stigma energy via working out, yoga, running. I love that. Surfacing conversations on norms, new ideas. Great. We're going to talk about that a bit next. Cultivate calm. So I see a couple themes here around walking, single tasking. I would love to, yes, Snap Us. And I'll put that, actually, I'll put a link to it in the resource materials. I'm not sure if it's there already. Spot. Actually, it's called Spot. Spot.us. Boundaries. I just want to hear if you put boundaries in as your word, if just a little bit more in the chat around that. What are you thinking, about establishing boundaries? Is it about the kind of ritual between work and home, boundaries with your technology, boundaries with other people, with your work? Protect your time off. Awesome. Yes, I'm seeing a lot of plus ones to that. Great. All right, so just give this another second to develop. It's like the old-fashioned way of developing photographs. You know how it's sort of the images start to appear, but boundaries seem to be a big resonator. All right, so I'm going to move into this next section. I'm going to present a few slides on this, and then get you into small groups. So we're going to be talking about defining a culture of well-being, and so workplace culture. That little visual on the left just shows you the kind of generic kind of components of culture: purpose, values, behaviors, which is, purpose is our vision, value is what we value most, behaviors are those things that we do to reinforce our values. And sometimes there's misalignment with those two, and that's what causes stress. Recognizing people, rituals, and cues. And we can't talk really about a culture of well-being without talking about how white supremacy culture shows up at work, and that is a huge generator of stress and burnout, particularly for people of color. And we just have to be aware of that. We have to work actively to turn around some of those norms around perfectionism, sense of urgency, defensiveness, and all of these things. And I also want to note that changing culture is not something you just snap your fingers and do. It takes a lot of work, and it's not easy work. It's hard work, and it's learning, and it's relearning. And I want you to think about it as giving yourselves permission to create something new that is amazing. All right, versus the difficulty of change. But this is this opportunity for something new, something better. Okay, so let's talk about what is comprised in a culture of well-being. It's the 5 F's, and these are F words that you can say. And they are functioning, feelings, friendship, forward, and fulfillment. I'm going to unpack these in a moment. But one simple way to kind of start the conversation around it is to do a brainstorm with your staff about what are some activities or new behaviors, new norms that we can start that relate to one of these 5 F's, and then start to practice them in small steps. So I'm going to run through and give you a couple examples, and then I'm going to put you into a breakout group to reflect on it. So the first thing is to rethink those meetings, right? We all have too many meetings. Even before the pandemic and the shift to virtual meetings, meeting overload has been this huge contributor to stress and burnout. And so we need to rethink meetings as a way to do something different. So first of it is, maybe we didn't end this meeting in the first place. So, right? Maybe a lot of us have recurring meetings on our schedule that we just do because we've always done it this way. Why change it? And they're really time wasters. And they're not only time wasters, but they're stress producers, And also another thing is that we may automatically block out an hour, right? And we don't need the whole hour, but we take the whole hour because that's what's been blocked out. I mean, permission to end early, or permission to schedule meetings that are shorter. It makes you a little bit more productive. Or if you've scheduled that hour, give the gift of some extra time back to people so they have that break in between Zoom meetings, or they actually have time to get some of that work done that is being generated by the meeting. This is just some ways to rethink meetings. I think a lot of multitasking and stress comes from being invited to sit in a meeting where the content isn't relevant, and it's not essential for me to be there. I would love it to see calendar software like Google and Outlook have an option to say, I decline because the content is not meaningful to me, is not relevant to me. So when you're planning a meeting, really think carefully about who you're inviting and make sure it's relevant. Another way is to rethink meetings is in terms of synchronous and asynchronous agenda items. Now, synchronous is in real time like we are now, but asynchronous are activities and tasks that people can do on their own time. And one simple shift with a meeting is to kind of shift some of the reporting, or maybe getting feedback on a report or a proposal, shift that to your collaboration software like Google Docs or Slack, if you're using that, or even email, and just get a round of feedback on that before you start the meeting, and then use the meeting just to discuss and make the decision. It'll feel better. Breaks between meetings, I've already talked about that. One way to normalize that is to shift your default meeting time to 50 minutes for an hour meeting, or 20 minutes for a half-hour meeting. There's a setting on Google Calendar and Outlook to do that. And that kind of builds in that break, and then respect it. And the other thing, and I love this idea, I can't wait to do it, is have an annual recurring meeting purge. Take them all off. all those recurring meetings, and then bring them back on after they meet certain criteria. I know that sounds scary, but it's kind of like like a Marie Kondo your calendar. If your day, our calendar looks like the one on the left, when do you get to the work done? When do you go to the bathroom? That's not a healthy work day. All right. And what I love is blocking time and making time to get the work done as a organizational or a team norm. And I love this. It's called Get Stuff, or there's another word for it, Done Day, where you as a team or an organization block out a half day of the week or month, and you actually plan with people, okay, we're going to use this time, we're going to go into airplane mode, we're not going to do outside calls, we're not going to do inside meetings. There's flexibility to it, because I know sometimes you can't always do that, but there's this block of time where we're going to do deep work and get things done. It really helps employees. It helps us all focus. It helps boost productivity. You get that sense of accomplishment. It reduces stress, and you create this really great rhythm. And in the resources, there's a great link to how you actually go through the steps you do to figure this out. Kind of doing a meeting inventory, finding the best time, getting buy-in for it. Friendship, celebrations. So we need celebrations in our life. We need to celebrate with the people. It's not all about the tasks. It's really about relationships too. And it's great to celebrate, the end of a successful campaign, or celebrate birthdays or work anniversaries. It's also about making connections, and this can be done anyway, but it has to fit your organization's culture. The one on the right, there was an organization I work with, and they were very Slack oriented. And they put the donut bot on Slack. And what the donut bot does is it matches people randomly to have coffee. So they were doing virtual coffee during the pandemic. And as they're coming back, they're matching people by their proximity to each other in their homes, to maybe meet up and have a cup of coffee outside at the local Starbucks or something. And they even rounded up a couple of gift cards to Starbucks. Check-in questions. This is about the feelings. People have to feel like they're appreciated. And again, one-to-one, it is about the work. It's about, deliverables. We got to get stuff done, but it's also about how people are feeling. You want to, if you're managing people, you want to also be asking these questions. Check-ins are really important. We have 2 check-ins there. Shout outs. All right. People want to feel appreciated for what they've done. There's less emphasis on how it happens. It has to happen. Your organization gets to decide that. But it can be organic. You can easily put a few minutes on a staff agenda, for example, and give people shout outs. There's a couple of caveats with it. You have to make sure it's inclusive, that you're not leaving anybody out, because feeling appreciated is important, because everybody's working hard. You want to understand what you're glorifying. You don't want to glorify over and shout out overworking or not appreciating life balance. And people have different ways or preferences for being appreciated. And this is a wonderful book, Dr. Gary Chapman. He's written one called The Love Languages. There's also one that's for the workplace. And his theory here in a second is there's, different ways that people like to be appreciated. Maybe they want words of appreciation, good job, acts of kindness, a lunch or some coffee, and or a gift, an object, or quality one-to-one time. And you want to appreciate people in the way they want to be appreciated. And the last point I'm going to make on this is, given that we've been online, it's harder to do this virtually, and you really have to be intentional about it than you would if you were face-to-face, where it could be a little bit more organic. Forward is about classes, is about professional development, personal development. And I urge you to be creative. I mean, there's lots of free classes online, allowing people to learn. Maybe there's been there's classes that you can develop. Maybe you're giving people a benefit where they could take a certain class. People have to feel like they're moving forward and constantly developing their skills, and so that's forward. There's also mentoring. There's also making, if you're the manager, making opportunities for people to flex and stretch. Being connected to the mission. And sometimes we lose sight of why we're working so hard, because we're not connected to the mission. And it's so hard because we're not in our spaces. I know, I can imagine it must be so hard for Charnay, because your reminder of being in that space inspires you about the work of COAC, right? And I love how you brought the space into your Zoom background, but we constantly have to feel connected to our mission, and storytelling is a great way to do this. And this example comes from the Kara Collective. And what they do is a weekly drumming circle, and they bring somebody who's been through their program to tell their story, and the staff feel inspires. There's also just doing it internally and having people share their stories about why they're doing the work they're doing, what inspires them. So these are the 5 F words that you can all say in a culture of well-being. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to put you into a small group again, and I'm going to do different groups. You're going to have, hopefully, if I don't mess it up, you'll have different ways to brainstorm and share. Maybe you're doing some of this already, or maybe there's some things you've thought about. And I'm going to also type in the F words, friendship. These are all okay F words. And fulfillment. So you have those when you're talking. And the next thing I'm going to do is put you, you just saw my outline. I'm going to now start to put you into the breakout groups. hold on for 1 second. We're going to do this in just a minute. Just give me a second. And also, as we're as I'm multitasking now, and if if there's questions here, I don't know, Charnay, you mentioned to me that that after the last time I was there, that COAC actually started to operationalize some of these. What are some things that you're doing there to create a culture of well-being? Maybe tell us a little bit. Come off mic if you're okay with that while I set up the rooms.
Definitely. I feel like definitely referring to the book the first time when you were referencing for the strategies for impact without burnout, we definitely tried some of the different practices, like kind of how she mentioned earlier, everyone, the different scale of where you are on the burnout, kind of whether it's like passion depleted or just kind of getting an idea of where you are personally. And then being able to do those tests with our team and being able to really just be open and a little vulnerable and honest with where do we feel we are, and really being able to kind of map out a self-care plan, or just being able to kind of find different ways we can incorporate, like the morning routine you mentioned, Beth, or just finding different ways we can really utilize better care for ourselves. But doing that as a team and actually taking time to not meet to talk about work, but actually taking 30 minutes each week to actually just chat, like, how are you feeling, especially earlier in the pandemic when there was so much happening in our country, being able to have that open space to be honest with one another and really connect on a humanity level, rather than just looking at one another for like, oh, what are you going to do, like your to-do items for the day. So yeah, I think that really was helpful, Beth.
Great, thank you. And thank you for, let me put you on the spot while I put everyone into groups. So now I'm going to be putting you into groups of 2s and 3s, and we might need to do a little bit of reshuffling. And you have the prompt that's in the chat, which is about how can thinking about the 5 F's at your organization, what can you create, what kind of calming norms and resilient virtual and hybrid workplace culture can you create? I'm going to open the rooms. We'll have about 10 minutes or so to talk about that in small groups. You'll be assigned, I think you might get an invitation and go. If if you missed it, it's where those 4 squares are. And I'm going to just patrol and make sure that there's nobody sitting in a room by themselves. Okay, we got 2. All right. Did I make you co-host so you could see the rooms too?
Oh no, I can. Yep, it popped up for me as well. This was great.
Okay, so let me just make sure that. All right, so I'm going to move Ingrid into room 6.
Yep.
Let's see did she move? Okay,
Yep.
All right. So we have 3 there. And is there anybody who?
Oh, room 5. It looks like Kyla is the only one in her room.
Room 5? Oops.
Yep.
Oh,
room 5 for Kyla.
Okay. Oh, from COAC. So let me put her into room 6. I know that's a little disruptive. Oh, come on, move. There we go. So we got 3, 3, 3, and 4, and there's no. Okay, we're good.
Oh, let me pause.
Time. And also make, wanting to honor, stick to our time so you can at least get a few minutes break before the next meeting that you're hopping to. And really, this is a way, I kind of view it as an appetizer to kind of check in with your peers, hear a few ideas, and then try something. So what we're going to do again is we're going to do another Slido word cloud. And again, the same code. You're going to go to slido.com. And the code is COAC113, which is November. It stands for November 3rd. It doesn't matter if it's capital or lowercase. And then what ideas bubbled up in your discussion? Let's see what resonated. And I'm just giving you a heads up. I might invite, we'll see what bubbles up and then ask you to unmute and share a little bit more about that. And also ask your questions too. And also, once we close the meeting, I'll hang out for a few more minutes if you have additional questions too. And it's not keeping you from taking a break that you deserve in your day. Let's see. I'm gonna just gonna move around the chat and the breakout room box. So many things that you have to pay to as a facilitator when you're all virtual. So many things you have to pay attention to. So I'm seeing lots of great ideas coming up. So I see one around that relates to the function, two of them, a couple of them, and restructuring time, in parentheses, meetings. I'm wondering, whoever, whose idea is that? If you could maybe unmute and share a little bit more about that.
I put it down. I think really rethinking what is a meeting for? Right, and why are we actually meeting, and making it more engaging and exciting instead of just going over an agenda could be really good and helpful. I'm not the leader of the group that is leading the charge, but I could maybe use my voice a little bit more to potentially implement some ideas. So we'll see.
That's great. I see. Yeah, the meetings kind of resonated. Meetings. Now it jumps, of course, improving and limiting meetings. So who said improving and limiting meetings? So that's limiting the amount of time for them per day, leaving time for a break. Sally, did that come from you? I saw you on mute.
Yeah, I think we were talking about a couple things. One is these enormously long staff meetings, and one person was saying, well, they kind of figured out who really needed to be at those meetings and just kind of simplify these meetings, and also to make these meetings fun, like some inclusion activities that were actually effective.
Awesome. And I see some more ideas here about rotating meeting facilitators. In terms of making them fun and engaging, I have included, or I will include if it's not already there in the materials I'll be sharing. I have a couple of really great resources about 28 fun team activities you can do virtually with your team, and they're really simple. You can modify them. I'm kind of an interaction geek, and I have a collection of different collections, so you can draw from those for inspiration. And none of them are terribly hard to implement. I like this is an interesting one, and it kind of relates to a question that came up earlier: technology meeting people where they're at. There was a question around how do we get an organization to get out of email and maybe use some of the collaboration tools like Google or Slack. Did the person who talked about technology meeting people where they're at, would you like to unmute and share? Let's see.
Yeah, I put that down. It's been a constant frustration with the organization I work at, because it's not up to par with technology, and I think we could utilize technology more. But someone said well, it's about meeting people where they're at, and I'm well, that's a really good point of being more aware of how people have different levels of technology usage, which completely frustrates me every day. So I'm trying to learn how to bring more front.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot, especially, and the pandemic has accelerated that, where the organization might say, we're going to use Google Docs, or we're going to use Slack. And some of the people who are comfortable with it use it, and they're having the conversation here, but the others never go in, so they're not getting the information, and then you have to post in both places. And so some of that is about getting, having a session to have a discussion and be explicit about the norms you're setting, and and everybody agreeing to that we're going to use this. And then there's also and then providing the training and support, the training wheels, so people start to use it. It's reminders around it. And then in some cases, and I've seen where maybe there's one or two people, maybe they're senior management team, or maybe they're on the board and they're just not comfortable with Slack. So then somebody serves as kind of the bridge moderator for them. But, so it's not having to send to everybody. It's kind of an email, cutting and pasting what's in Slack. I know it's frustrating, and saying, this is what's being discussed. And eventually you'll move them along. start small and celebrate small wins. That's a great idea here. And I saw that also in one of the celebration came up as a theme. Now I'm looking at it, I can't even see. Connecting partners and stakeholders to mission. Let's go to that one. Who came up with that idea? Where did that bubble up? Tell us more about it.
That was me. Hi, this
Oh.
is Alex. We were sort of talking about in our group how a lot of the work that some of us do is with other nonprofit partners or municipal agencies who are just as exhausted and taxed as we are, and maybe don't have the sort of tools to connect to the mission that we have the flexibility to have access to in the nonprofit sector. So, you know, it's been like a lot harder to engage them over this past year, and it's always been a hard job to engage, especially government agencies. So sort of bringing some of these tools into those circles and conversations to help feel sort of like less exasperated by those interactions and that work. So sort of extending it, like not only applying it to our personal, like connecting us to the mission, but connecting the people we work with to the mission to hopefully like keep the work moving.
That's great. And what are some of those tools?
Well, something that we talked about, like if you're convening, like I'm convening a large meeting in a couple months that has a lot of different agencies at the table. I'm thinking about doing some kind of like a show and tell activity where everyone brings a personal story or experience to the group to connect them to why they do the work or why they care about what we're working on together. So giving everyone sort of an opportunity to make that connection for themselves and bring that to a community.
Great. So that's an awesome idea. I absolutely love it. And these are amazing, great places to start. And I think if you're trying to get input back from your team, one approach would be to have, explain what a culture of well-being is and get people to brainstorm different ideas, have people prioritize, maybe vote on a few and pick a couple of one or two ideas that really resonated and assign a group to be responsible for helping execute on it. And a lot of these aren't expensive. They're really about, a lot of them are around norms. And let's say there's one where you're going to do, you're going to create 20-minute meetings instead of 30-minute meetings for something. You'd actually put the new norm on your agenda and then save a couple minutes at the end to say, hey, how did this work as a 20-minute versus a 30-minute meeting? And how can we make this better? And this kind of continuous improvement, being intentional about it will help you create this as a norm over time. So, we're in the last stretch before we close. Again, I'll stick around for a bit, but futureme.org is a wonderful tool because you can send an email to yourself, post dated into the future. I do this every year at New Year's, and I send a note. I actually do it every New Year's, and then I do a quarterly email to myself to remind myself of my goals that I set for the year. But I also, after I take a class or something, I also write myself a note in Futureme for about a month later. I'm noticing, and of what I'd like to put into practice. And so maybe jot down a few ideas that you would like to get started with to bring back. Maybe it's telling other people on your staff some of the highlights from the workshop. Maybe there was a specific thing that you wanted to address. Make a note of that. You could send an email to yourself as a reminder, for another month. I love getting these because I always say, whoa, what is this? And I go, oh yeah. And I'm always really surprised because a lot of times I've done it. So think about that. And I think there's been a survey URL that has been put into the chat. And so please, I'm going to actually give you some time to do that. This is my sort of thank you slide. Take note of that URL at the bottom. That's where you're going to find the slides. I have to PDF them and put them up there, but there's a curated list of reading. There's the handouts for your for the burnout assessment, for self-care, work-life balance plans, for the process for the 5 Fs, a couple of the other resources that I mentioned. And I'm going to turn it over to Charnay to close. And after we close, I'll hang out here a few more minutes if you have questions.
Thank you so much, Beth, for a wonderful conversation and just being able to facilitate this important discussion. And really thank you all for attending and contributing. This was really great for me, and I hope everybody took some value from this experience. Like Beth mentioned, she compiled a lot of wonderful resources that I'll also send in the follow-up email. I did drop the link in the chat, so please feel free to also refer to it there. And we really appreciate any feedback through the survey. That link is also in the chat and will be in the follow-up email. But I invite you all to enjoy the rest of your day. Me and Beth will be on closing, so if there's any last minute questions. But thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.
Yeah, so we all should like wave goodbye. Well, I'm going to take a photo. And again, if you'd like